we're looking at what is arguably the most culturally familiar verse in the entire world, John 3:16. I mean, you see it literally everywhere, right? On giant billboards, at football games, printed on your morning coffee mug. But today, we are not going to treat it like just another catchy slogan. Instead, we're going to deconstruct it together. We're going to dig right down into the bedrock of this text and reveal its profound theological architecture. We're talking monumental realities that have been hiding right in plain sight.
To make this incredibly familiar verse feel entirely new again, we're going to use a kind of tear down and rebuild approach. So, here's the game plan. We'll start by moving beyond the slogan. Then we'll dive into the anatomy of love and the incomparable gift. After that, we'll look at a continuous faith. And finally, we'll map out the whole architecture of redemption. Let's get to it. Okay, section 1, beyond the slogan, contextualizing the famous verse. Look, we have to remember this isn't just some standalone quote dropped out of thin air. It is actually the doctrinal climax of this really deep late-night conversation Jesus was having with a Pharisee named Nicodemus. And the whole thing? It's rooted entirely in Old Testament expectations, specifically the bronze serpent in Numbers 21. Moving into section 2, the anatomy of love, the lexical engine, part 1. Now we're going to shift gears a bit. We're going to surgically deconstruct the original Greek text to uncover the exact motive behind the incarnation. And trust me, every single word chosen here carries immense weight. Take the Greek word hothos, for example. It translates to thus, in this way, or so. Now, think about the classic King James translation. God so loved the world. The risk there is that we just read it as a statement of magnitude, right? Like, he loved it so much. But actually, hothos is an adverb of manner. It prioritizes method. It points to a very particular, unrepeatable historical act. It's essentially saying God loved the world in this specific way. It points backward and forward in the text, showing us exactly the mechanism of how that love actually manifested. And that brings us to agapesin, which means loved. Now, quick Greek grammar check here. Notice that this is an aorist active indicative. All that really means is it marks a completed, historical act. We aren't talking about just a feeling or some ongoing emotional disposition floating out there in the ether. No, this is an event that decisively broke into human time. The Theological Dictionary of the New Testament tells us we have to carefully distinguish this volitional, covenantal love, that's agapao, from mere desire, which is eros, or even just brotherly affection, phileo. This is a deliberate, self-determining love that actively chooses and acts. This love absolutely precedes the gift. The giving itself, that's the ultimate proof of the love. Then we hit ton cosmon, the world. I want you to really highlight this in your mind because right here is the absolute scandal of this verse. You see, in John's gospel, the world doesn't just mean some neutral collection of people. It means the human world in its fallenness, in its total alienation from God. It's humanity actively organized in opposition to its creator. Think about that for a second. This means God's love is being directed toward a hostile entity. So this love, it's an act of sheer sovereign grace. It is absolutely not a response to human merit, because, frankly, there is zero merit to be found in a world that is actively rebelling against him.
All right, moving on to section 3, the incomparable gift, the costliness of the giver and the given. So we're shifting now from the internal motive of God's love to the actual, tangible substance of the gift itself. And here's the kicker. God doesn't just give a theological principle. He gives a person. It's completely unique in all of religious literature.
The Greek word used here is just incredible, monogeny, translated as only begotten or unique. It's a combo of monos, meaning only, and genos, meaning kind or genus. What this means is that the Son is not just one among many children, not at all. He is literally the only one of his specific kind. He shares the very ontological nature of the Father. You know, the costliness of a gift is always measured by the identity of both the giver and the given. And here, God is giving something of incomparable, truly infinite value because he is giving the unique Son of his very own nature. Now think about the massive typological echo happening right here. Go back to Genesis 22. Abraham is asked to sacrifice Isaac, his beloved son, but at the absolute last second, he's spared, right? God provides a ram in the thicket instead. Any Second Temple Jew listening to Jesus would have caught this echo immediately. But here in John 3:16, God gives his unique son, and guess what? There is no ram in the thicket. God actually followed through. He did the very thing he stayed Abraham's hand from doing. It's just staggering when you put it into perspective.
And that powerful thought brings us to the word begotten. He gave. This is another one of those aorist, active, indicative verbs. It's this decisive, deeply historical giving that encompasses the entire movement of the Son into human flesh, the incarnation, all the way through to the crucifixion. And listen to this because it's so important. This is not a loan. It is an irrevocable gift with absolutely no retrieval clause. The lexical data heavily connects this to the sacrificial register of the Passover and even the prophecies of Isaiah 9, where a son is given specifically for the recipient.
Which leads us to section 4, a continuous faith. The double outcome of belief. We've seen the gift itself. Now let's look at the human response that's required and the massive, massive contingencies that this gift overcomes. This next part brilliantly illustrates a nuance that so often gets lost in English translation. John doesn't use the phrase pisteulion alto, which just translates to believing him, like giving intellectual assent or just saying, yeah, I believe what you're saying is true. Instead, he writes pisterion eis alton, believing into him. That little preposition right there, eis meaning into, is absolutely crucial. It implies a directional, relational, and totally dynamic union. Plus, the Greek present participle here indicates an ongoing, continuous breathing of faith. Faith isn't just some door you walk through once and you're done. No, it is the air you continually breathe. So, what exactly does this continuous faith prevent? Well, it prevents apolitai, perishing or being destroyed. Now, quick heads up. In Johannine theology, this does not mean a simple annihilation where you just blink out of existence. It means ruin. It's the final, permanent severance from the source of life and human flourishing. Think of the tragic condition of a lost sheep or a burst, ruined wineskin. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew equivalent was used to describe Israel's judgment in exile. But here, John uses a Greek subjunctive mood paired with a negative, and it is incredibly strong. It essentially means, by no means should they ever perish. It is literally the ultimate reversal of judgment.
So, instead of perishing, the believer receives zoein aionion, life everlasting. But wait, don't just think of this quantitatively, okay? It's not just a timeline stretching on endlessly into infinity. It is highly, highly qualitative. We're talking about the resurrection life of the age to come, being shared directly with those who are united to the Son. It's what theologians like to call inaugurated eschatology. All that really means is that eternal life isn't just some far-off destination you tap your foot waiting for in the distant future. It's a present possession. If you believe into him, you are stepping into the new creation right here, right now. All right, section 5, the architecture of redemption, reassembling the verse. We've taken the entire engine apart piece by piece, right? So now let's put it all back together and observe the absolute massive, redemptive, historical shift that this one verse triggers. Take a step back and look at how redemptive history has moved. We go all the way back to the Adamic era, where access was strictly about obedience. Then we move through the Abrahamic, Mosaic, and Davidic covenants, which leaned heavily on law, sacrifice, and obedience to gain access to the Promised Land or God's presence. But look at the New Covenant. The mode of access completely changes. It becomes grace and faith in the Son, and the ultimate object is eternal life. John 3:16 basically serves as this grand, booming doctrinal announcement that pivots the entire biblical framework away from law and sacrifice straight into grace. Talk about a paradigm shift. And this entire architecture is inherently Trinitarian. The Father loves and the Father gives. The Son is the one who is given. And as we actually see just a few verses earlier in John chapter 3, the Spirit is the agent of this new birth. We absolutely have to emphasize here that God's originating love precedes any human action whatsoever. It acts as the initial cause. The gift of the Son is the incredible expression of that cause. Faith is simply the instrument to receive it, and eternal life, well, that's the stunning result. So synthesizing everything we've learned today gives us this wonderful, hyper-literal translation of the Greek. For thus loved God the world, so that the Son, the only begotten, he gave, in order that everyone believing into him should not perish but should have life everlasting. When you read it like that, it perfectly demonstrates that this is not just some sentimental, emotional statement meant for a bumper sticker. Not at all. It is a powerful, covenantal, soteriological, and Christological engine that drives the whole New Testament. I want to wrap up our explainer today by really looking at the devotional reality of this text. I want to ask you, are you right now resting the full weight of your life into him? Remember what we talked about. Believing isn't just a past event to remember fondly. It's an active, present posture that you maintain every single day. The gift wasn't some cold principle. it was a person. So my challenge to you is this. Let this profound architecture completely change the way you breathe the air of faith. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other overly familiar verses might be hiding massive theological engines just waiting to be uncovered? Think about that.